Untold eyewitness account. Cheyenne warriors wooden leg at Little Bighorn battle. 1876, they all went crazy. Instead of fighting us, they turned their guns on themselves. These chilling words from Wooden Leg describe the final moments of Custer's men. At Little Bighorn, a perspective of the famous battle, rarely told in American history. If you're fascinated by untold Native American stories, hit subscribe on Native Legends and History Stories now. For more historical truth-telling from indigenous perspectives, how did a coalition of tribes with primarily bows and arrows manage to defeat the well-armed U.S. cavalry so decisively that soldiers chose death by their own hands? The answer lies in a battle strategy so effective. It shocked even the warriors who executed it. The morning of June 25, 1876, began quietly at the Native American encampment along the Little Bighorn River. Around 7 or 8 in the morning, Cheyenne scouts spotted U.S. soldiers in the distance. Wooden Leg, a northern Cheyenne warrior, who would later provide one of the most detailed Native accounts of the battle. In devastating volleys, we found the soldiers at about 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, I believe so. Wooden Leg later recalled. The warriors had spent most of the previous night in alert vigilance, anticipating possible conflict. Their bodies were weary, and their horses, critical for both combat and potential retreat, showed signs of exhaustion. We had slept very little, our horses were very tired, so we were not in a hurry to attack, Wooden Leg explained. This fatigue necessitated careful planning, rather than an immediate offensive. The warriors knew they needed to conserve their strength for what might become a prolonged engagement. The encampment at Little Bighorn was extraordinary in its size and composition. It represented one of the largest gatherings of Native American tribes in recorded history, with Cheyenne, Sioux, and Arapaho warriors united in response to increasing threats from U.S. military forces. All three tribes had assembled along the river in a sprawling collection of teepees that stretched for nearly 3 miles. Almost all of our northern Cheyenne tribe was at Little Bighorn, Wooden Leg stated. The camp followed traditional arrangements, with each tribe maintaining its own section, while establishing mechanisms for shared defense and decision-making. Leadership within this coalition was clearly defined. Only one man was considered above all others. That was Sitting Bull. He was recognized as the old chief of all the camps combined, explained Wooden Leg, while Sitting Bull provided spiritual and strategic guidance as the overall leader. Legendary warriors like Crazy Horse of the Oglala Lakota directed tactical operations on the battlefield. Despite their numerical advantage, approximately 15 to 2,000 warriors against Custer's force of about 600 men, the native forces faced significant disadvantages in weaponry. Modern firearms were relatively scarce among the tribes, with many warriors relying on traditional weapons. Guns were not plentiful among us. Most of our hunting had been done with bows and arrows, Wooden Leg noted. The warriors compensated for this firearms shortage with exceptional archery skills. Their bows could launch arrows in high, arcing trajectories that would rain down upon enemy positions, a technique that would prove devastatingly effective against the cavalry's linear formations. As morning progressed, tension mounted throughout the camp. Warriors began preparing for battle, painting their faces, securing personal medicine items, and readying their horses. Unlike the more uniformly equipped U.S. soldiers, the native warriors carried diverse weapons, from traditional war clubs and lances to whatever firearms they had managed to acquire through trade or previous conflicts. A warrior named Tumoons moved through the camp, calling out, "The soldiers are coming, but we will fight on our terms, not theirs. Ready yourselves, but hold your positions until the signal comes." The gathering of these tribes represented not just a military alliance, but a desperate stand to protect their way of life. Government pressure to force Native Americans onto reservations had intensified in recent years, particularly after gold was discovered in the Black Hills. Sacred land to the Lakota, this encampment of non-treaty Indians refused to recognize the government's authority to restrict their traditional territories. As the soldiers approached, the native warriors recognized the gravity of the coming confrontation. It would be one of the final opportunities to demonstrate their military strength against the encroaching United States, a nation determined to claim all Western territories for settlement and exploitation. The battle began with scattered skirmishes, as both sides tested each other's positions and resolve in one early engagement. A young Cheyenne warrior eager to prove his courage charged far ahead of his companions. This impulsive action quickly turned dangerous as U.S. soldiers accompanied by their Native American scouts, primarily from the Crow and Arikara tribes, who had long-standing rivalries with the Sioux and Cheyenne, pursued him in this early fighting. A young Cheyenne rushed too far forward, and some Indians belonging to the soldiers chased after him. Wooden Leg recounted seeing their fellow warrior in peril. Wooden Leg and several others rode swiftly to intercept the pursuers, successfully driving them back and rescuing the impetuous young man. The early fighting also claimed prominent victims. Jack Red Cloud, son of the respected Oglala Sioux chief Red Cloud, found himself in a precarious situation when his horse was shot from beneath him. According to tribal custom, warriors were expected to maintain composure. During such moments, the horse of Jack Red Cloud, son of old Chief Red Cloud, was killed in the Indian way. In such a case, the warrior must stop and unbridle his killed horse to show his coolness. But young Red Cloud forgot to do this. Wooden Leg explained, this momentary lapse in adherence to warrior protocol left Red Cloud vulnerable. 3 Crow scouts working with the U.S. military seized the opportunity, striking him with their quirts, leather riding whips, and snatching his war bonnet. A deeply humiliating blow to a warrior's pride. Amidst the growing chaos, accidents also claimed casualties. Among the native forces, White Wolf, a Cheyenne warrior approximately 30 years old, suffered a serious, self-inflicted wound while preparing for battle. White Wolf, a Cheyenne about 30 years old, had a repeating rifle, and when drawing the weapon from its leather case, on the left side it was accidentally discharged. The bullet broke his left thigh bone, described Wooden Leg. This incident highlighted the dangers that inexperience with firearms posed to warriors, more accustomed to traditional weapons. As the morning progressed, the sounds of battle intensified. Wooden Leg, who had managed to find a brief moment of rest, was jolted awake by the escalating commotion. Something in the noise startled me. I found myself awake, sitting up and listening. He recalled, recognizing the unmistakable sounds of combat. He hurriedly donned his battle attire and gathered his weapons, rushing to join the growing conflict. The native warriors employed sophisticated battle tactics that bewildered the military formations of the U.S. cavalry, rather than engaging in direct frontal assaults that would have favored the soldiers' superior firearms. Hundreds of mounted warriors rode rapidly back and forth in front of the military lines, presenting constantly moving targets. Many hundreds of Indians on horseback were rushing back and forth in front of the soldiers. Wooden Leg observed, this tactic served multiple purposes. It disrupted the soldiers' aim, created confusion about the actual number of warriors, and allowed the native forces to assess the soldiers' positions and response patterns. Meanwhile, the U.S. troops had established positions on flat ground in the valley, attempting to maintain disciplined firing lines. The soldiers were on the flat ground of the valley, and were shooting with rifles. But not many bullets were being fired back at them, but thousands of arrows were falling down among them. Wooden Leg noted. The native warriors conserved their limited ammunition, while employing their abundant supply of arrows. In devastating volleys, the high, arcing trajectories of these arrows made them particularly effective against troops in fixed positions. As the battle intensified, native forces began encircling the soldiers, who sought cover in a wooded area. Our Indians poured down toward the timber, where the soldiers were described Wooden Leg. This maneuver effectively trapped the military units, cutting off potential escape routes and preventing coordination between different segments of the cavalry. The Sioux warriors demonstrated particular resourcefulness, crawling forward with burning materials. The Sioux were crawling forward to set fire to the timber. Wooden Leg recalled this tactic, aimed to flush out the soldiers from their protective cover, forcing them into the open, where they would be more vulnerable. The strategy worked suddenly. The hidden soldiers burst out of the timber on horseback, Wooden Leg reported, facing the prospect of being burned out or shot. In their increasingly untenable position, the soldiers made a desperate break, charging from the woods and attempting to reach the river for an alternative defensive position. The native warriors immediately pursued the retreating soldiers in the chaotic, running battle that followed. Wooden Leg joined the pursuit, firing his rifle repeatedly at the fleeing troops. I shot 4 times with my rifle. I do not know whether any of my bullets did harm. He admitted the combat was so frenzied that individual warriors could rarely confirm their impacts. During this pursuit, he witnessed the devastating effectiveness of traditional weapons. I saw a Sioux put an arrow into the head of a soldier. Wooden Leg and his companion, Little Bird, singled out one particular soldier, pursuing him relentlessly. Little Bird and I were chasing a certain soldier. Little Bird was wearing an extended war bonnet. He was on the right, and I was on the left of the fleeing man. We were striking him and his horse with our pony whips. Wooden Leg recounted. The desperate soldier, aware of the immediate threat, pointed his revolver backward and fired a bullet into Little Bird's thigh. This injury to his companion triggered an immediate response from Wooden Leg. I struck the white warrior on the head with the heavy deer horn handle of my pony whip. He recalled. The powerful blow knocked the soldier from his horse. Wooden Leg quickly seized the opportunity, claiming a valuable prize. I jerked loose the rifle strapped on his back. When I got this weapon, he fell to the ground. This acquisition of a military rifle represented not only a practical gain in firepower, but also a significant trophy of war. Across the battlefield, the fighting fractured into numerous, smaller engagements as the cavalry's formation dissolved under pressure. In one dramatic episode, 3 mounted soldiers became separated from their comrades. 3 soldiers on horseback became separated from the others and began running up the valley in the direction from which they had come. Wooden Leg observed. The isolated soldiers presented an immediate target. 3 Cheyenne Sun Bear, Eagle Tail Feather, and Little Sun, along with some Sioux, pursued these 3 white men. The soldiers, recognizing their desperate situation, attempted different escape routes. One of the soldiers turned his horse eastward, toward the river, and escaped into the timber. The other continued southward. The fate of these men demonstrated the thoroughness with which the native forces cleared the battlefield. No isolated soldiers were permitted to escape and potentially return with reinforcements. Even native scouts working for the U.S. military faced deadly consequences. Wooden Leg witnessed the pursuit of one such scout, identifiable by his distinctive headdress. An Indian wearing a war bonnet belonging to the soldiers was pursued by Crook Nose, a Cheyenne, and some Sioux. Wooden Leg recounted these scouts from tribes allied with the U.S. government, primarily Crow, Arikara, and Shoshone, were viewed as traitors by the Sioux and Cheyenne, and when captured, often faced harsher treatment than white soldiers. As the initial engagements concluded, Wooden Leg's attention was drawn to new developments on the battlefield. Someone said to me, "Look, there are more soldiers. I saw them on a distant hill, down the river and on this side of us." He recalled. This was likely Colonel Custer's main detachment, positioning themselves for what would become the final phase of the battle. The intensity of combat briefly diminished, allowing Wooden Leg a short respite. He used this opportunity to return to his family's lodge, where he found his father anxiously awaiting news. My father was the only one at our lodge. I told him about the battle in the valley. I told him about having helped to kill enemy Indians and some soldiers at the river. Wooden Leg recounted. This moment revealed the personal dimension of warfare, as the warrior proudly shared his accomplishments. With his father, I gave him tobacco I had taken. I showed him the gun and all my bullets. His father, concerned for his son's safety, urged caution. "Your horse is tired," he argued, suggesting that Wooden Leg had done enough for one day. But the young warrior was determined to rejoin the fight. "Yes, but I want to ride another one," he insisted, exemplifying the commitment that drove many warriors to continue fighting, despite exhaustion, with a fresh horse. Wooden Leg returned to the battlefield, where the conflict had shifted to the hills, where Custer's men had established defensive positions. The native forces adapted their tactics to this new terrain. When we came near the fighting, each one chose for himself a special path. Wooden Leg explained. This individualistic approach allowed warriors to utilize the landscape to their advantage, approaching from multiple directions simultaneously, making it impossible for the soldiers to establish a cohesive defense. The warriors crawled along ravines and gullies to approach the soldiers' positions without exposing themselves to direct fire. Once in position, they relied heavily on archery, tactics that had proven effective in the earlier engagements. From the Indian hiding places, arrows could be shot high and in long curves to drop down upon the soldiers or their horses. Wooden Leg described. This indirect fire proved devastating to the cavalry. The arrows dropping onto horses stuck in their backs and caused them to plunge about, throwing off the soldiers. These panicked horses disrupted the military formations, leaving soldiers vulnerable to follow-up attacks. Individual warriors employed careful attack patterns to minimize their exposure, while maintaining pressure on the soldiers. A warrior would jump up, shoot, duck down quickly, and then crawl forward a little, explained Wooden Leg. This methodical approach allowed the native forces to gradually close distance with minimal casualties, while the psychological impact of being under constant fire from unseen enemies further demoralized the soldiers. As the warriors tightened their encirclement, a Cheyenne chief named Lame White Man recognized the opportunity for a decisive stroke. Rising to his full height, he called out to his warriors, "Come on, we can kill all of them." This bold declaration galvanized the native forces. The Indians all around began jumping up, running forward, dodging down, up again, down again, all the time toward the soldiers. Wooden Leg recalled this coordinated charge from multiple directions overwhelmed the remaining defensive positions. What happened next became one of the most contested aspects of the battle. According to Wooden Leg, right away, all the white men went crazy. Instead of fighting us, they pointed guns at themselves. This observation led many native participants to believe that, faced with inevitable defeat, the soldiers chose suicide over capture. When later questioned about this claim, Wooden Leg maintained his position, while acknowledging the limitations of his vantage point. I do not know. I could not see them, but I believe they did. So he stated. While historians continue to debate whether mass suicide occurred among Custer's men, this perception among Native witnesses remains a significant part of their oral history of the battle. The final moments of the soldiers on Last Stand Hill happened with shocking speed. Warriors swarmed the position from all sides, and within minutes, the last organized resistance of the 7th Cavalry at Little Bighorn had been extinguished. With the battlefield fallen silent, Wooden Leg walked among the dead, leading his horse through the scattered batas. The aftermath of combat revealed both the brutality of warfare and the cultural practices that followed victory. I took a scalp while walking and leading my horse among the dead. I observed a face that interested me. Wooden Leg recalled. His attention was drawn to a distinctive feature. The dead man had a long beard growing from both sides of his face and extending several inches below his chin. He also had a full mustache. All the hair on the beard was light yellow. Fascinated by this unfamiliar physical characteristic, Wooden Leg decided to preserve it. I scalped one side of the face and half of the chin to keep the long beard on the removed part. Amidst the victory, Wooden Leg also encountered the human cost of battle. Among his own people, he searched for a fellow Cheyenne warrior who had been reported wounded. I went to where he was said to be, down the gulch, where the bunch of soldiers nearest the river had been killed in the first fighting. Wooden Leg recounted. The injuries he discovered were severe. Noisy Walking had been hit by 3 different bullets, one of which had passed through his body. He also had some stab wounds in his side. The native warriors collected various items from the battlefield, often misinterpreting their purpose. Due to unfamiliarity with American technology, Wooden Leg described his encounter with a pocket watch. It was made of white metal and had glass on one side. When another warrior examined it, he held it close to his ear, then held it closer. It is alive, he said, curious. Wooden Leg also listened to the mysterious object. I put it to my ear. Tick, tick. Tick, tick. Unable to comprehend its actual function. As a timepiece, the warriors developed their own explanation. We talked about its use. We generally agreed that it was some special medicine of the soldiers despite their overwhelming victory. The battle had claimed native lives as well. 6 Cheyenne were killed, Wooden Leg stated. Matter-of-factly, though, this represented a remarkably low casualty rate. Compared to the complete annihilation of Custer's forces, news soon arrived that additional U.S. troops were approaching the area. The tribal leaders gathered to determine their next course of action. They decided we should continue in our old direction of travel and not fight any soldiers if we could escape without doing so. Wooden Leg explained the strategic decision: prioritize the safety of their communities over further military confrontation, recognizing that despite their victory, continued conflict with the United States military would ultimately prove unsustainable. Before departing, the Cheyenne held a traditional victory celebration. Charcoal Bear, our medicine chief, brought the buffalo hide from the sacred lodge and placed it upon a pole at the center of our camp circle. Wooden Leg described during this ceremony. Warriors' accomplishments were publicly acknowledged. My father told in a few words what his 2 sons had done. This recognition proved particularly significant for Wooden Leg, as it formalized his transition to a new identity. From this time onward, people still used my boyhood name, each from his hand, but now this old name has entirely gone away. His actions in battle had earned him the name by which history would remember him. Wooden Leg. The Battle of Little Bighorn stands as one of the most significant Native American military victories against the United States. Through Wooden Leg's detailed account, we glimpse not just the tactical brilliance of the combined Sioux and Cheyenne forces, but the human experiences that shaped this pivotal historical moment. The victory proved temporary. Within a year, most of the tribes involved would be forced onto reservations, their nomadic way of life permanently altered. History books often relegate Native perspectives to footnotes, but stories like Wooden Legs demand recognition. They reveal complex motivations, sophisticated military tactics, and the human dimensions of a conflict, too often simplified into mere names and dates. If you value these authentic, indigenous perspectives that challenge mainstream historical narratives, subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories now. Only by understanding all sides of history can we truly comprehend our shared past and build a more honest future.